This job with TWRA came along. I grabbed it. Had a wonderful time over there. Great professionals that I met. We were at the forefront of the conservation movement in the state. I hit it at a time where there was no stagnation. I mean, every day was a new day, and we were given the ability to invent new programs, and it was exciting.
Yeah.
This business has been good to me, and it has inspired me to become an artist. I'm not a starving artist. You can tell an artist loves what they do because of how they paint and what they paint. And I do a variety of things. We talked about landscape, but over there on the wall is a little J3 Cub that my dad and I used to fly, and I love doing that. Overall, you could say I was a landscape painter, but all wildlife artists are landscape painters.
Yeah.
They just insert wildlife in that scene. I paint in oil mostly, but I can do watercolor and other things. I've done a lot of just scenics.
I look around your home and in your office, I see birds, see a lot of birds. You love painting wildlife as well. What's your favorite? I'm assuming ducks. I'm thinking ducks might be one of your favorites.
Probably so.
I see a pencil drawing of an elephant behind you, and then I see, other landscapes and things around. What's one that stands out to you that you like the best, that, not related to wildlife, but just maybe you're in your travels?
Waterfalls are always intriguing. I've painted Fall Creek Falls several times.
Won't you take me back to Tennessee?
The award-winning Tennessee Wildcast is on the air with the latest info about hunting, fishing, boating, wildlife watching, and all things outdoors. This year, we celebrate the men and women of the TWRA responsible for 75 years of wildlife conservation. Now make welcome your host, Jason Harmon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Tennessee Wildcast. We're glad you're tuning in. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. It's going to be a fun show for you today. We are on location in Clarksville, Tennessee today, Don.
Yes.
Visiting with Mr. Larry Richardson, and he worked for the agency a while back, and we're going to kind of look back again this week.
Yeah,
We've
that's
been
right.
Doing many of those shows this year with our 75th anniversary, so just going to reminisce a little bit and learn about some of his paintings. He's gotten into.
And you mentioned Larry's name already, Larry Richardson. There's probably people out there going, I know Larry, and then there's other people go, that name sounds familiar. And then, Larry is really a Renaissance man. He he's into music, he's into art, he's into outdoors, hunting and fishing, and environment, and like you said, has worked for the agency. You might have met him at a DU banquet, or you might have seen him on the banks of the Cumberland River painting a really nice scenic with some happy little trees.
Always happy.
Yeah. Happy little scenes.
Yeah.
Well, Larry, thank you for having us in your home today.
I'm glad you guys came. I really, and you mentioned my name several times. I forgot to mention this to you earlier, that there was another Larry Richardson involved in the conservation movement back in the 70s and 80s. He was from Knoxville.
Oh, really?
And we would get to see each other occasionally, and we were going to a National Wildlife Federation meeting in Milwaukee one time. We both flew up there together and we shared a room together. American Airlines canceled one of the tickets because they thought it was a duplicate. We got up to Milwaukee, they'd cancel one of the rooms reservations. So we had to start using our middle initials in order to separate.
Hey, I've been there with the other Don King too, so
you know what happened.
Yeah.
Striking resemblance there. Well, Larry, thank you again. We'll start by introducing you to the folks listening and watching today. A little bit about your career with the agency and just kind of who you are, and we'll start from there.
Okay. Yeah, I really was fortunate to get on with the agency when I did. I had graduated from Austin Peay State University here in Clarksville, and a couple of years later I came back and got my master's degree in biology, the 2 degrees in biology. And I wanted to get into the field of biology some way or other, and the jobs were not very plentiful. I think the figures I remember were that only 12% of the graduates could ever wound up doing what they wanted to do.
Wow.
And so I politicked for it and got on with state parks. and became the chief naturalist over there. And this job with TWRA came along as the I&E chief, the kind of the public relations chief, and I grabbed it and had a wonderful time over there. Great professionals that I met, and we were at the kind of the forefront of the conservation movement in the state. The agency back then was called Game and Fish when it started.
Yep.
In 1949, it acquired that name. And we were at a point where we needed to do something differently. We needed to look at ourselves and change some things to adapt to the modern times.
Right.
And part of that was changing our name to the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency to encompass all wildlife. And we actually had a forester on staff as well. It wasn't just animals. Habitat became very important. Without the habitat, you don't have game and fish.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was an exciting time to be there.
So you were there during the transition from Game and Fish to Wildlife Resources Agency, and you even had a part in coming up with that designation, right?
Well, we sat around and tried to come up with a name. We wanted to make that change. We did some internal changes with personnel and our direction and our long range plan. And one of those things was, let's call ourselves something a little different that pulls in the bird watchers. You don't have to hunt and fish in order to
appreciate what
support,
the agency does. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was glad to be on that team that created that new name, and new logo for that matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Neat.
Yeah. So if you don't know I&E, Information and Education, that's what it was when I started.
Right.
So that was the era. Now it's Communications and Marketing. But still doing the same thing.
Well, we put out weekly or almost daily news releases to all the newspapers, television, radio. And then on the other side, we created educational programs for schools. People could come to the agency office, and we'd take them on a little wildlife hike around the area. We built a little outdoor theater.
I remember that. Yeah.
Down the hill in front of the office.
And there was also a swinging bridge that forded the 7 Mile Creek down there, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And back then we had an exhibit at all the major fairs across the state, not just Memphis and Nashville, Knoxville, but I don't know, we must have had 7 or 8 different cities where we actually set up a wildlife tent. Of all things, we had a snake pit. The kids could go up to the edge and see rattlesnakes and copperheads and all that.
Oh, wow.
But we had bears, some of the injured animals that we had taken in. We put those in that exhibit and recouped to health. And so that was, I was able to hire a few people, including the eventual executive director of the agency, Ed Carter.
Exactly.
He started as just hey, you go do this, and then he wound up being the boating safety director and assistant executive director, and wound up his career leading the agency. I'm really proud of Ed and his accomplishments.
And my predecessor in Dave Woodward.
That's right.
Yeah, you had a hand in hiring him as well.
And law enforcement, Sonny Richardson, several people that wound up being the agency leaders.
Hey, you had a good eye for talent.
I must have. I'll take all the credit.
Well, while we're here on some of the history of the agency, I wanted to make sure we touch on these. You said you were a big part in the Hunter Ed, the start of Hunter Ed. Well,
nationwide, there was a movement to create hunter education in each of the wildlife agencies all over the country, and we were one of the first. We wrote a manual that all the kids could read, and then they took an exam to show that they were prolific in all the skills that they needed. Some states, like Colorado, actually required you to go through that course before you could hunt in their state.
Right.
So that made a lot of parents if they wanted their children to go with them on these trips, they had to go through our course and get certified in order to get a license. So the hunter safety program was in its infancy at that point, and it's still going strong.
What a legacy. So many. Gosh, I think we hit the 500,000 mark, maybe, gosh, back when the cicadas were here the time before.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I wouldn't be surprised. My son went through it with me one time back in the 80s, and he did well, but not because I coached him. He read the book.
Good.
So if you read the book, you could do well and get your certificate.
I heard he might have felt like you had a little leg up on him, maybe. Did he say the cheat word, or what was the deal there?
Well, just because I made 100 on the test,
Helps to have helped write it.
Yeah, I guess it does.
That's funny. Well, and then you mentioned before we started the show that you helped in editing the magazine. So you wrote articles for the Tennessee Conservationist.
I did.
But now we have our own magazine. But one of our earlier magazine editors.
Yes, at the time we shared it with the Conservation Department. That's now called the Environmental.
TDEC, yeah,
TDEC,
Environment and Conservation. Yeah.
But we only had one magazine, and so we every other month we would be responsible gathering the material and writing it and publishing it, that issue. But later on, the agency developed its own magazine, which still survives today and does. If you have people listening, you can subscribe to that magazine. Just go on the website and.
Guess who's editing that now?
All right.
Got my hands full. I got a plate full of things going on.
That's a good challenge. It really is.
But yeah, it's amazing. I had written down here 72 to 75. You were with the agency.
That's about right.
A short stint there, but so much you accomplished so much.
Yeah.
Well, I hit it at a time where there was no stagnation. I mean, every day was a new day, and we were given the ability to invent new programs, and it was exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome. Yeah. And so you had other ideas and moved on to some new things and eventually came back to it. But I don't want to go too deep without hitting some of this painting and your artistic side.
Oh, yeah.
That's what brought us here today.
I guess the next step from when Larry left the agency, he went to work for Ralph McDonald, right?
That's right.
Okay.
One of the nation's premier wildlife artists in the early 70s. There was an environmental movement all across the country, and along with that brought out a new genre of art, wildlife art, and some wonderful painters switched careers. Actually, the people who were trained to be graphic artists decided to try their abilities to develop this wildlife conservation art, and Ralph was among them. He had been working at the Methodist Publishing House, and he could do figures really well. I mean, he illustrated the Bibles and stuff like that. But he grew up as a hunter and fisherman, so it wasn't a tough transition. Somewhere along the line, about I don't know, 79 or 80, he and I wrote a book, kind of a coffee table book of his career, included many of his paintings.
Yeah.
So again, I got back into the writing part of my career. And later on, he did another book, and I helped him do that one as well.
I mean, just being around somebody like Ralph, gosh, had to be a great mentorship, really. To
inspirational.
See, yeah,
you're right. I tell people I looked over his shoulder, and I really did.
Oh yeah.
I would come in. He had a studio in our office, and he would paint all the time. I mean, he was having had that training as a graphic artist. You're constantly getting new projects to jump into. So he was good at that. I can't tell you how many paintings he did in his career, but it was a real treat to watch him. And he would stop every once in a while and say to me some things that he had learned. This is why you need to do that, and so forth.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot.
That's
really
neat.
did. And I've known a lot of other famous artists since then that have helped me in my career. Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about your side of it. What you like to paint and the types of paintings you do. What's your favorite?
I think overall you could say I was a landscape painter, but all wildlife artists are landscape painters.
Yeah.
They just insert wildlife in that scene. I paint in oil mostly, but I can do watercolor and other things. I started out with acrylic, which looks a lot like oil.
Okay.
It dries faster, and that's what a lot of illustrators use because it does dry quickly, and you can do a project in 2 or 3 days and it's finished. But somewhere along the line, I switched to oils, and really love doing that. I've done a lot of just scenics. I've got a project that I started a few years ago to paint scenes of the Cumberland River, which is Clarksville is one of the 2 large towns on the Cumberland River. Nashville is the other one.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been all the way from Harlan, Kentucky, where it starts, down to Smithland, Kentucky. It dips down into Tennessee and then goes back to Kentucky and empties in the Ohio River. So I've been the entire length of the river. I've done over 50 paintings. And there's always, you turn around, there's a new scene. You never run out of ideas. And
Stand in the same place and there's a new scene.
Well,
right?
you
turn around.
Someone talked about you step in the river today, you step in it tomorrow, it's not the same river.
Right.
Obviously.
You're right.
The water moves on.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a good place to see wildlife as well, obviously. We've got eagles that stay here year-round, bald eagles.
Mm-hmm.
A variety of birds that fly up and down, either stay here all year or pass through migration going south or north. So it's a river of commerce. There are barges running up and down the river every day. I've done several paintings of those. We've got a company in Memphis that has the old paddle wheelers, and they come up to through all the way up to Nashville through the dam lock system.
Yeah.
So it offers a wide variety of scenes to paint.
And I learned a little fun fact today. Larry asked us as we were setting up, which river do you think is the longest, the Tennessee or the Cumberland? And obviously, we kind of lean toward the Tennessee.
Right.
Yeah, it has.
We were wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. It looks on a map. It looks like it's a longer is optical illusion, I guess. But the Cumberland starts further north and east. The Tennessee starts in Knoxville, so the Cumberland has about 50-mile leg up on it.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But they're very important in the settlement of Tennessee and Kentucky.
Definitely.
Because of floated flatboats, canoes, whatever down the river. Nashville was obviously started through by river traffic as well as overland. It's funny thing also, a lot of these towns around were started at salt licks because you had to have salt. No refrigeration. You had to have salt to preserve your meat. And there were some big salt licks in the Nashville area. Goodlettsville has a big salt lick, and the long hunters would travel to those places. They would salt down the deer and whatever else they had shot and carry it back to North Carolina where their families were. So it played the river played a real important part in settlement. Sure did. Of course, fisheries are alive and well in the Cumberland River. So one day I just thought, man, that'd be a great project. And so it never ends.
Well, outside of that, I look around your home and in your office. I see birds. See a lot of birds. You love painting wildlife as well. What's your favorite? I'm assuming ducks. I'm thinking ducks might be one of your favorites.
It probably so. I spent several years with Ducks Unlimited, and I do know, I can tell you and your listeners that there are over 950 species of wildlife that live in wetland areas. So there's a lot of subject matter there.
Definitely.
But the ducks are I forget how many species there are in North America, but some are native. The Canada geese, as everybody knows, are here all year round now.
Yeah.
We started that program back in 1965. We traded Ohio, I think, some deer for some giant Canada geese, and they put them in Gallatin at a farm pond, and they pinioned their wings so they couldn't fly. But one of the neat parts about bird biology is that wherever they hatch is wherever that's where they come back to.
Oh,
To
okay.
create their own nest.
Right. Yeah.
Same way with the migratory birds in Canada. They go back to where they were born.
Mm-hmm.
So these Canada geese learned that this was a reasonable climate here, plenty of food. So everywhere you look, there's a goose.
Lots of golf courses.
Oh, don't talk to them about geese. But yeah, I like to paint ducks, and that, as most of your listeners know, the government has created a license built around ducks called the duck stamp.
Yes.
Every year since 1934 or 5, somewhere along in there, mid-30s, there has been a waterfowl license in the form of a stamp that you adhere to your state license.
Mm-hmm.
And every year it's a new species. There's a contest every year that artists can enter. And I was called about 3 years ago to be one of the judges for that prestigious
What an honor.
contest. And you can only do it once in your lifetime, so that even makes it more prestigious.
Yeah.
So, but every year you buy a new stamp, and that funds the refuge system all over the country. So it goes for a worthy cause. And again, those refuges will not only help the ducks, but over 900 other species of mammals, reptiles, fish, etc.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. It's amazing what you can do for one species, and then it helps all the others.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
It really does.
Well, outside of painting, you love the outdoors. You grew up hunting and fishing, is that right?
I did. I was fortunate to grow up in a little rural town in Kentucky, just north of Clarksville, across the state line. And we had access to a lot of farms. My friends and I we'd take off in the morning, be gone all day, go down to the creek, wade in the creek. Sometimes we'd actually go swimming in the creek. I told my mother that a few years later. She said, "Oh, you didn't?" Yeah, I did, Mom. But we could actually shoot quail back then. I mean, they were more abundant back in those days because there was a lot of habitat. The fence rows were still there. The edges to the woods were still conducive for raising quail. But we fished the creeks, the lakes. That really got me started thinking about a career in this business. And I have found that if you're doing something you really like, you do extra work. I mean, you put yourself into it.
Yeah, exactly.
And you guys know that because you're doing something you love.
Mm-hmm.
I've spent a few years doing things I really didn't like, even though I made a lot of money. It wasn't what I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
So this business has been good to me, and it has inspired me to become an artist.
That's great.
We were talking earlier that I'm not a starving artist, but I never did have to make a living being an artist. There are some starving artists out there, but you can tell an artist loves what they do because of how they paint and what they paint. And I do a variety of things. We talked about landscape over there on the wall is a little J3 Cub that my dad and I used to fly, and I love doing that. And I was also telling you about my dog and I walking through this farm field one day, and there was a little pond. It started as a stock pond probably, but it had grown up and a lot of cattails. We walked up to that, and all of a sudden these mallards jumped out of there and scared us to death.
I bet.
But that was so memorable, and I need to put that on my to-do list. I need to paint that. That was remained so indelible in my mind.
Yeah.
All these years.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure those memories stand out and inspire a lot of your work.
Another thing I learned today, Jason, was that Larry's a pilot too. I had no idea.
Oh, really? I missed that tidbit.
Well,
Yeah.
I did fly for a while. Got darn expensive.
Yeah. Oh,
There are
yeah.
other things I need to pay for, and wound up. I did it to show my dad I could do it.
Uh-huh.
He was in the Air Force in World War II, and he always liked flying, so when I became an adult, I said, well, I'm just going to show him I can do that too. And
Good.
so I spent several months doing that.
Hey, if you've got a plane in the family, he owned the plane.
Yeah, he had this little 2-seater.
Wow.
Yeah, that really got me started.
And there's a painting on the wall that is really cool.
Well, I hear an old World War II warbird flying over. I'll run outside and look up in the sky because I can hear it coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm always interested in seeing things like that. I've painted a few other airplanes, old B-17s and things like that. So, yeah, it's just one of the things I really like.
Yeah, that's neat.
Well, one of the things that just popped in my head, and we got a few minutes here. I see a pencil drawing of an elephant behind you, and then I see other landscapes and things around. What's one that stands out to you that you like the best? That's not wildlife or not that not related to wildlife, but just maybe in your travels.
Yeah.
It could be wildlife, I guess, but in your travels.
Well, yeah,
what stands out?
waterfalls are always intriguing. I've painted Fall Creek Falls several times. Also, Cumberland Falls, which is the second largest falls east of the Rockies, behind Niagara at Cumberland Falls. In fact, it used to be called the Niagara of the South.
Okay.
People who couldn't afford to go to Niagara Falls on their honeymoon went to see the Cumberland Falls. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. This big painting on the wall here is of Provence, France. I've been to Europe several times, and
Awesome.
you see things over there that are hundreds of years old, not just 200 years old like we have here. And this was inspiring. A little town in Provence.
That's very pretty. Do you capture that image in a photo and try to or is it just what you saw when you were there?
Well, I travel with a sketchbook. I actually do some just black and white pencil sketches. Maybe if I've got the room to carry it, some small watercolor sets.
Okay.
And just do the pencil drawing, then color it in like a coloring book, and then expand on it when I get back to the studio. I've done that with Italy as well.
Nice.
In Scotland, I love everywhere you turn in Scotland. There's a painting.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're going to run out of time here, but you mentioned bow hunting when you were a kid, winning a couple of trophies. Bow hunting. You're pretty a sharpshooter, huh?
Well, that was fun too. I like target shoot. Yeah. And then the agency in Kentucky came around the school systems, and once a year, and we went out to the local firing range and set up, shot clays as well as targets for bows and arrows.
Yeah, help hone in your bow hunting skills. And anyway, that's cool. I've enjoyed our conversation today and learned a lot today. I think it's you had a cool life. I mean, experience so many different things, be part of so many different things.
What a legacy, especially with the agency and beyond. Just everything wrapped around conservation in Tennessee. We owe you a bunch, Larry.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed talking about it, and come back sometime.
All right, sounds
Definitely.
good.
I'd love to. Well, this is Tennessee Wildcast. Thank you all for tuning in. Thanks for watching, listening. Keep following us. Keep coming back. Subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Stay connected with TWRA by visiting our website at tnwildlife.org and follow us on Facebook, X, and Instagram. Join us as we celebrate 75 years of conservation in our great state. You can invest in Tennessee's wildlife future by purchasing a license at GoOutdoorsTennessee.com. That's GoOutdoorsTennessee.com.